Hey everyone, welcome back to the Legend of Billy Shears, A Hidden Revolution. Thanks for joining me, and remember to like and share. Remember, the Legend of Billy Shears videos are directed towards an intermediate to advanced audience in the Beatles and Paul is Dead conspiracies. If you are a beginner, you may not feel comfortable with the material being presented. For this video, you will need to understand that biological Paul McCartney died in 1966 and was replaced by a person who I call Billy Shears. This video examines who Billy Shears really is, where he came from, and who his biological father really was. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a little history on why I fell into the topic of Aleister Crowley being Billy Shears' biological father. Some years back, I was talking with a group of Beatles conspiracy researchers. The topic of Crowley came up, and someone had suggested that they wondered if Crowley could be Billy Shears' biological father. At that moment, it was really said as a joke between researchers. Then, during a later interview, I brought the idea back up. And again, almost as a joke, thinking it might spice up the interview just a bit. I set out really believing that I would research Crowley just a bit and prove that he was not or could not be Billy Shears' father. Several years later, and after hundreds of hours of research, I will admit to you that it was impossible for me to disregard the Crowley relationship with Billy Shears. And I began to believe that it was much more than just Billy admiring Crowley somehow. It was difficult in the beginning researching if Crowley was Billy's dad. That isn't something you can just Google. Eventually, I realized that perhaps it was easier to figure out who Billy's mother was, which I discussed in the previous video entitled Miss Pat, Is She Really the Mother of Billy Shears? Once it became more apparent to me that his mother was Miss Pat, the rest started falling into place. In short, it likely would have been too much for the public to know that Billy Shears was the biological son of Aleister Crowley. They just weren't ready to hear it. However, times are changing, and I believe that the truth of who Billy Shears' father and mother were will be revealed in the somewhat near future. A person must be open-minded and ready to entertain the idea that Billy Shears' daddy could be such a controversial historical figure. If you enjoy living in a world where you believe the narrative, that is what we have been sold as history, then this video may not be for you. However, if you're ready to expand your way of thinking and be open to new ideas, the topic of Father Crowley can be really fascinating. Not just because it was hidden in plain sight as a part of Shears' hidden revolution, but because it unlocks so many other aspects to the Beatles and the real hidden truth. Again, thank you for joining me here on The Legend of Billy Shears, The Hidden Revolution. I hope you will enjoy the presentation. Edward Alexander Crowley was born October 12, 1875, in Royal Leamington Spa, England. His parents were strict fundamentalist Christians, something that Crowley was not accepting of after childhood and the death of his father. He was educated at Trinity College, Cambridge, but did not complete his degree. His family enjoyed wealth and privilege. However, he soon squandered his inheritance, living much of his life with little money. Crowley became a prominent figure in the occult, known for his writings on magic, that would be magic with a K, his involvement with the Golden Dawn, OTO, and being the founder of Thelema. He was the author of several texts on mysticism, magic, and philosophy, including the Book of the Law, with an unofficial tagline, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." It is well known that Crowley was into heavy drug use, sexual exploration, and excelled at mountaineering and chess. It is suggested that he was an intelligence officer or served the intelligence community in some capacity for England during World War II. Some suggest that the villain character in the James Bond Casino Royale was based upon him. Crowley was nicknamed the Beast by his mother, an alias he proudly carried throughout his life. he once faked his own death. He believed he was the reincarnation of Pope Alexander VI. Aleister Crowley passed away on December 1st, 1947, with Miss Pat by his side in Hastings, England, at a boarding house known as Netherwood. Although his celebrity faded after his death, his teachings lived on in print, and a revival of his work seemed to begin to resurface in the 1960s. Crowley remains influential today in the occult, music, and pop culture sphere. In order to understand that Billy Shears and biological Paul McCartney are not the same person, it is imperative to understand that Billy Shears was born in 1937 and that biological Paul McCartney was born in 1942. That's right, Billy is 5 years older. How do we know this? In the book, Memoirs of Billy Shears, it straight up tells us that Billy is 5 years older than Bio Paul. However, Memoirs is a work of historical fiction, meaning that there is at least some information contained within those pages that is not truth. So we look for another source to corroborate that information. Strangely, the source is Billy himself in the movie Magical Mystery Tour, where he is quoted as saying, "I myself am 30, but look younger." Remember, Magical Mystery Tour was Billy's homecoming to his native Cornwall, where he lived as a young child. There are subtle and sometimes not so subtle clues throughout the film and photo shoots of those days in Cornwall with regard to Billy. Once we have established this through Billy's own testimony, that Billy is indeed 5 years older, we can start looking at who his parents were. It is well documented that Miss Pat had a relationship with Aleister Crowley that produced a son in May 1937. In a television interview, which can be found on the prior video about Miss Pat, she confirms that she indeed did have a baby with Aleister Crowley. Crowley wrote a letter to his son and mentioned his son, referencing him by name or age in a few other writings. Billy was conceived as part of a moonchild ritual between Pat and Crowley in August of 1936. He was born Randall Shears Daughtry and was nicknamed Aleister Ataturk by his father. Remember that Shears was a name that we talked about in the previous video going back to the Deidre of Sorrows myth. When translated, Shears means gear, as in McGear. Remember, Billy has referred to his son James as Young Turk. Could that be short for Young Ataturk? I cannot begin to tell you how many hours I stared at this photo of Aleister Crowley and his son, Aleister Ataturk, trying to piece together some clues. For years, I saw nothing significant. A rock, a child, a man, a dog, sand. One day, while making a video, I happened to put one photo from a day at the beach in Cornwall during the Magical Mystery Tour next to the rocks photo and went back and forth looking at them. I realized that in the photo that contains adult Billy Shears, that his body language was suggesting not to look at him, but to look at something behind him. Then I realized it was the same rock as the one we see young Ataturk and Crowley posing for a photo on. I later confirmed through AI that the rocks were the same. What else can this photo tell me? I didn't really think it could tell me anything, but there are a couple of physical characteristics about young Billy that stand out. For example, the torso is the same. Also, the chin. Memoirs tells us that Billy had cosmetic surgery on his nose and his chin to look more like Bio Paul. Examining this photo that I found on an official Paul McCartney website that is Billy as a younger man, you can see that his pre-surgery chin is similar to baby Ataturk's chin. I do consider the rock photo a significant clue in the legend of Billy Shears, and I do believe that the young boy we see on the rock posing with Aleister Crowley, who Aleister Crowley says is his son, is the person that we know today as Paul McCartney. Let's not forget the Sgt. Pepper cover. Most everyone knows that Crowley appeared on the cover, but so did a lot of others. However, looking at this pyramid-style photo of the Pepper cover, it shows Crowley at the top of everything. OTO symbols and the A symbol similar to Crowley's own signature. Aleister Crowley is Sgt. Pepper. In an attempt to keep this video short and simple, I have not included some of the small or miscellaneous clues that might link Billy Shears to Crowley. However, there are a couple of items I feel are truly worth review. If you are interested in additional clues or information, please feel free to click on the links below to watch my prior works on Crowley, Miss Pat, and other members of Billy's clan. One of the biggest clues is wings. Billy named his post-Beatle band Wings. Aleister Crowley wrote a book called The Winged Beetle. In case anyone didn't know, a scarab is a beetle. An internet search regarding how the winged scarab is significant in the occult is quoted as, "The winged scarab is a powerful symbol in the occult, representing ascension, spiritual enlightenment, and release from material limitations. It bridges the earth and spirit, reminding practitioners of the inseparable connection between their daily actions and sacred intentions. The winged scarab's journey beyond cycles and resurrection signifies a higher state of consciousness and the potential for transformation and renewal. It is often used in magical practices and rituals to invoke specific energies and protect against evil forces." Also, in the Billy Shears story, we see significant references to Egyptian gods. Billy is the Horus character, with Bio Paul being the Osiris character. In Egyptian astrology, according to Billy's birthday of May 2nd, he is also considered Horus. Additional information can be found regarding the Horus-Osiris myth being played out by Billy and Paul in Memoirs of Billy Shears, and one day I hope to make a video on that topic. I try to avoid sharing writings from Aleister Crowley due to some being infused with magic, some being dark, or just not ideal for public consumption. However, this Crowley writing outlines what dates are ideal for those who might get on well with a person born on May 2nd. Strangely enough, look at how many players in the Billy story are born within those dates. Personally, I fall into the other batch, the ones he might not get on well with. Also, Nancy didn't fit into the mix, but most everyone else in his family did. So what do you think? Was I able to convince you in this short but sweet video the true relationship between Billy Shears and Aleister Crowley? Could Aleister Crowley really be Billy Shears' daddy? Could Aleister Crowley really be the inspiration behind the Beatles from late 1966 on? Could Billy really keep all that under wraps for 60 years? I say yes. There is enough evidence pointing from Billy Shears to his mother, Miss Pat, and to his father, Aleister Crowley, to establish that Billy Shears, also known as Alistair Ataturk, also known as Randall Geard Daughtry, and other various names, is the biological son of Aleister Crowley and Deirdre Patricia Daughtry McAlpine McClellan, who was the product of a Moonchild ritual. Short of DNA test or a confession by Billy himself, this is about as close as we can get. I routinely disable the comments on my videos, but please feel free to email me at legendofbillyshears@gmail.com with your comments or insights. Thank you so much, and I hope you have enjoyed the presentation. So when you see this long and winding road, these roads that twist around a little bit in imagery, it often is a symbol that represents Kabbalah magic.
In 1934, Crowley began a libel case against a writer who described him as a black magician. He was desperate for money and believed he might be awarded damages. Examples of Crowley's pornographic poetry were read out in court, and then the wife of Rao Loveday, the young man who died in the Abbey of Thelema, gave evidence of Crowley's depravity. The judge was appalled, saying that in 40 years of justice, he had never heard of such wickedness. Crowley lost the case and ended up bankrupt. But even after such a humiliating defeat, his extraordinary magnetism was undiminished.
After a court case that Crowley loses, a young woman called Deirdre McKellum comes up to him and says, "I want to have your child," basically. And Crowley agrees, and they go off together, and they perform a ritual to have a magical son, a sort of a magical heir for Crowley. And they perform various rituals, and they do have this son, and his name is Alistair Ataturk.
Well, after he took me in his arms on the doorstep, that beastly lodging which had lace curtains into the window, I don't know where it was now, he said, "I want you and I want your child." Well, I wanted a child, and I just started from there. Then he came round and saw me off. He had to give up drugs, pretty well give up drugs for 3 months, because he couldn't conceive very easily. Well, I suppose I conceived. He did the other thing, but...
That was the only child who, in the everyday concept, I think he really loved, whom he wanted to see have a future.